boy's bold words left an entire courtroom speechless. "You're my mum. What happened next will break your heart." In the hushed silence of the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Today wasn't just another custody hearing. The weight of the case hung in the air like a dense fog, and every participant seemed to understand that something unexpected was brewing. Judge Olivia Turner, an embodiment of professionalism, sat at her bench, observing the case with the familiar poise she'd mastered over her decades on the bench. At 55, she'd seen countless custody hearings, each one more or less blending into the next. But as she shifted her gaze to the young boy in the center of it all, Michael Johnson, she felt something stir in her, an unease that she couldn't ignore. Michael, small for his age, shifted nervously in his seat. His hands, gripping the edges of the chair, betrayed the anxiety he tried to suppress. With every argument from the attorneys, he grew more restless, more visibly uncomfortable. But then, something changed. The room fell quiet as Michael stood up. The sounds of papers shuffling, of distant murmurs, ceased to exist. His voice, barely above a whisper but charged with determination, echoed through the room. "I just want to say something," Michael said, his words ringing with the clarity of someone who understood more than he let on. His eyes were focused, not on the judge or the attorneys, but on the truth he was about to lay bare. There was no hesitation in his words. He knew what he was about to say mattered. Judge Turner was taken aback, her eyes scanning the boy's face. "Michael, this isn't the time for personal statements," she replied softly, but her voice trembled with a hint of uncertainty. She'd seen many children, lost, confused, and seeking connection, but there was something different about Michael. His demeanor wasn't that of a typical child searching for attention. It was that of a child who had known a deep, painful truth all along. "I know you're my mum," Michael repeated, louder this time. The words crashed into the room like thunder, making everyone pause, their eyes locking on him in disbelief. Even Judge Turner froze, her professional mask slipping ever so slightly. What was this boy saying? Was he out of his mind? The whispers began to circulate. Some onlookers were incredulous. "Is she really his mum?" one woman whispered to her neighbor, her disbelief echoing in the court. The murmurs grew louder, but Michael stood firm, unwavering in his conviction. For a moment the room stood still. Judge Turner felt the weight of Michael's gaze, as if he had just opened a door to a memory she had long sealed away. It wasn't just the words, it was the look in his eyes, those eyes that seemed so familiar, as if they belonged to someone she had once known but thought she had left behind. Judge Turner sat motionless, her heart racing. Michael's words had shattered the walls she had carefully built around herself. She had been in this room hundreds of times, presiding over cases that involved heartbreak, loss, and sometimes betrayal, but nothing had prepared her for this. There was no rational explanation for what Michael had said, and yet something inside her stirred, as if his simple declaration had pulled the threads of a past long buried. Her eyes shifted from the boy back to the attorneys, but her mind was miles away, caught in the currents of a memory she thought she'd drowned. As the attorneys continued their heated arguments about stability, custody, and placement, their voices became nothing more than background noise, distant and blurred. Judge Turner's gaze softened as she unconsciously reached for her gavel, her fingers brushing the smooth wood. The room around her seemed to fade, leaving her with only the weight of Michael's gaze still locked on her. His expression was calm, steady, as if he already knew something she was still trying to grasp. Was this some kind of game, a desperate attempt to get attention? No, she knew better. There was an unshakable truth in Michael's voice, something raw and honest that made her question everything. For a brief second she thought back to when she was younger, to a time when her own decisions had been weighed with uncertainty, when the choices she had made felt like they might follow her forever. It was impossible to ignore the gut-wrenching feeling in her chest. Was Michael truly her son? Judge Turner snapped back to reality as the sounds of the courtroom filled her senses again. The arguments raged on, but she could no longer focus. Her heart raced as she locked eyes with Michael once more. The little boy with the serious gaze, who had no idea the storm he had just set in motion. He wasn't just any child in the courtroom. He was a link to a past she had buried and forgotten, a past that suddenly felt like it had been waiting to resurface. What if, just what if, he was telling the truth? "Mr. Harrison," she called softly, her voice betraying none of the storm brewing inside her. "I need a moment in chambers with counsel." Her decision was clear, but the storm inside her heart was just beginning. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Judge Turner rose from her seat, her movements deliberate but heavy with the weight of uncertainty. The courtroom, now devoid of the usual bustle, seemed suspended in time. Every step she took toward her chambers felt like the echo of a lifetime of choices, each one leading to this moment. Behind her, the whispers began to rise, but she barely noticed them. Her thoughts were consumed by Michael's words, those simple, undeniable words that had cut through the veneer of her professional composure. In her chambers, the door closed softly behind her, leaving her alone with the attorneys. She could feel the tension in the air like a thick fog. The two lawyers stood, waiting for her instructions, but she could barely focus on them. Her mind was racing, jumping from one thought to the next. Michael was her son. The truth was undeniable, yet the path ahead was a maze of emotions, legal entanglements, and a lifetime of lost time. "Your Honor!" The voice of Miss Delgado, the lead attorney for the foster agency, broke her train of thought. She turned slowly, her gaze steady. "Is there something we can assist you with?" she asked, her tone polite but edged with concern. Judge Turner nodded slowly, her voice low but firm. "I need you to investigate something for me," she began, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "Michael Johnson, does his file contain any sealed records? Anything connecting him to me?" The question hung in the air, and Miss Delgado's eyes flickered with unease. "Your Honor, we haven't had any indication," she started, but Judge Turner interrupted her, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "I want access to all adoption records involving Michael Johnson. I know the process is supposed to be confidential, but this situation is different. I need to know if my name is in those files," Judge Turner said, her words steady, yet the tremor in her chest grew stronger. The silence that followed was thick with the weight of the request. Finally, Miss Delgado cleared her throat, her voice cautious but respectful. "We can expedite that request, Your Honor." As the attorneys left her chambers, Judge Turner remained standing, her hands gripping the edge of the desk. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. This wasn't just a case to resolve. It was her past, her choices, and a future that was beginning to look much different than she ever imagined. Michael wasn't just a child caught in a custody battle. He was a lost part of her life, and it was time to confront the truth. The room had gone silent when she re-entered. Everyone was waiting, watching, unsure of what would happen next. Michael Johnson was sitting at the same spot, his small hands clenched tightly on his lap, his gaze unwavering. His earlier words hung in the air like a weight that refused to be lifted. "You're my mum." It was a confession, a claim, a thread of hope. And now it was a truth she couldn't escape. The murmurs from the spectators had died down, and even the opposing attorneys seemed unsure of how to proceed. Judge Olivia Turner took her seat once again, her eyes briefly catching Michael's. The boy, with his deep brown eyes, his quiet strength, was still holding her gaze, as if daring her to refute the truth he had spoken. She couldn't. Clearing her throat, Judge Turner straightened her back. Her professional mask was back in place, but it was no longer as firm as it had been moments ago. The truth she had kept buried for so long was now forcing its way to the surface, and there was no going back. "I need to address something." Judge Turner's voice rang through the courtroom, quieter than usual, but carrying the weight of everything she had just discovered. She turned toward Michael, her voice softening. "Michael, what you said earlier, I need to ask you something." Michael sat up straighter, his eyes wide, waiting for her to speak again. "Where do you think I'm your mother?" The question hung in the air, and the room held its breath. Michael swallowed, his voice barely above a whisper but filled with certainty. "I found papers. They had your name on them, and when I saw you here I felt it." Judge Turner blinked, her heart tightening in her chest. For a moment, the courtroom faded away, and it was just the two of them. She hadn't expected this confrontation, this connection to resurface so suddenly. But now that it had, The truth could no longer be ignored. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, and when she opened them again, there was no more hesitation. "Michael, what you're saying, it's true," she said softly, her voice breaking just slightly. Gasps echoed throughout the room as the truth crashed down on everyone. Michael's face lit up with realization, his eyes filled with unshed tears. For a moment, the boy's heartbroken smile was the only thing in the world. Judge Turner stood up from her bench, walking toward him slowly, the years of silence and regret pressing in on her. When she reached Michael, she didn't hesitate. She pulled him into her arms. The courtroom exploded into whispers, but neither of them cared. In that embrace there was a connection, a new beginning, a mother and a son reunited against all odds. The years of wondering, of unanswered questions, were finally over, and the road ahead, though uncertain, was one they would now walk together. As Michael stood in the embrace of his mother, the years of pain and separation seemed to melt away. But as the court murmurs swirled around them, the reality of their situation began to settle in. Michael's hands, still trembling from the intensity of the moment, gripped Judge Turner's coat tighter. This wasn't just a reunion, this was the beginning of a difficult journey, a journey neither of them had prepared for. The room was in shock, and yet, in the quiet that followed, something shifted. The tension in the air was palpable, but so was the potential for change. Judge Turner pulled away gently, her eyes never leaving Michael's face. His eyes, filled with wonder and confusion, searched hers, needing confirmation of the impossible truth that had just been laid bare. She reached down to take his small hands in hers, the weight of the moment settling over them both. "I know this is overwhelming," Judge Turner said softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But we have a lot to work through. And I promise, Michael, I won't let you go again. We have time now. Time to figure this out." Michael nodded slowly, his gaze still wide, but now there was a spark of something else. Hope. But it wasn't just about the truth that had come out. It was about the journey ahead. This wasn't a story of simple closure. It was a story of rebuilding, of healing, and of forgiveness, both for themselves and for the lives they had lived apart. The courtroom had gone silent, the officials and spectators watching as the two of them stood there, a mother and son, coming to terms with the unexpected reunion. And as much as the world outside had expected this to be just another custody case, it had become so much more. Judge Turner finally turned to face the room, her expression resolute. The moment of silence had passed, but the weight of it lingered. She cleared her throat, taking a deep breath. The law, which she had dedicated her life to, was no longer just about cold decisions and verdicts. It was now about family. It was about a responsibility that extended beyond the courtroom and into the lives of those she had vowed to serve. "Michael is my son," she said, her voice unwavering, "and as his mother, I'm going to make sure the truth is honored in this court." The room fell into a heavy silence once more, as Judge Turner's words echoed throughout the courtroom. There was no denying it now. Everything had changed. As she turned back to face Michael, her heart swelled with a mixture of relief, guilt, and an overwhelming need to make things right. She had spent so many years carefully guarding her past, compartmentalizing it into a neat box, far away from her work, her career, her identity. But now, Michael's presence had ripped that box open, exposing everything she had long buried. Michael looked up at her, his small hand still clutched tightly around hers. His expression had softened, though the weight of everything was still there. He wasn't just looking for answers. He was looking for belonging, for a place where he could finally stop feeling like an outsider. And for the first time in years, Judge Turner saw him for who he truly was, a child, not a case number, not a file to be closed, but her son. "I'm sorry, Michael," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "I should have been there." Michael, ever the resilient boy, gave her a small smile, his eyes still bright with hope. "You're here now," he said simply, as if all the years of separation didn't matter anymore. It was a quiet reminder that sometimes the past didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be acknowledged. The attorneys, still in the background, exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to proceed. The courtroom, however, had shifted in a way none of them could have anticipated. This was no longer a legal battle. It was a matter of heart, a matter of justice that transcended laws and rulings. Judge Turner knew that she couldn't continue presiding over Michael's case. Her presence would only complicate the process. So she made the difficult decision to recuse herself, ensuring that another judge would take over to maintain impartiality. But that decision didn't mean her role as a mother would change. She would be there for Michael, guiding him through this unfamiliar journey, protecting him from the emotional turbulence that would surely follow. The story of Michael and Judge Turner wasn't just about the courtroom. It wasn't just about a judge and a boy finding each other after years of separation. It was about confronting the truth, accepting responsibility, and healing from the scars of the past. And in that moment, as Michael held her hand and the courtroom's attention was held by them, Judge Turner understood something profound. It's never too late to rebuild what was once broken. In life, we are all bound by our choices. Sometimes we cannot undo what has been done, but we can choose to make things right, to heal, and to move forward with courage and love. This story serves as a poignant reminder that the truth, no matter how painful, has a profound power to heal and change lives. Just like Judge Turner, many of us hide parts of our past, whether out of fear, guilt, or a desire to protect others. But as Michael's courage demonstrated, acknowledging the truth can bring unexpected clarity and create opportunities for reconciliation and growth. In today's world, it's easy to get caught up in the roles and labels society places on us. We might judge people by their appearance, job, or background, forgetting that each individual has a complex history, just like Michael. His story challenges us to rethink how we treat others and to question the assumptions we make daily. The lesson here is clear: we must be willing to confront uncomfortable truths in our own lives. It's never too late to make amends or to rebuild relationships, no matter how much time has passed. Don't let fear or pride stop you from reaching out to those you've lost touch with or from admitting mistakes. Like Judge Turner and Michael, we all deserve the chance to start over, rebuild, and create something better for ourselves and the people we love. So, take that step, acknowledge the past, be present, and make things right.